welcome everyone to our program today, Thinking Beyond the Crisis, Building Digital Resiliency, a special publisher's town hall presented by Copyright Clearance Center. Where are you right now? At the kitchen table, seated by a desk in the spare room? Maybe you're hiding from the family in the garage, or else you found yourself a quiet corner in a damp cellar. It doesn't matter really. You and me and many more around the world are at work online. With the world in lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic, the offices and classrooms where only weeks ago we would gather and collaborate are now off limits. The digital office where we meet today occupies no space and any space. In an extraordinarily short time, COVID-19 has impacted every aspect of our lives, while rewriting the rules for business, academia, technology, publishing, and the media. Publishers globally and in every field have done exceptional work to make the sudden, unexpected shift to an exclusively digital environment. In this first Publishers Town Hall from CCC, our special guests will offer actionable insights and the latest information to help you begin to see beyond the crisis. In the brief hour ahead, we want to hear from you too. As Allison said, please send us your questions using the chat box. If we can't respond today, let us know how to reach you for a personal response. Right now, though, we want to begin with a quick poll of our attendees to get a feel for who's in this virtual room. We've seen from our registrations, chiefs of publication, directors of global sales, vice presidents of licensing, executives in marketing and product development. We'd like you to tell us which sector of the industry best suits you, just to give us a picture of which part of the industry you're coming from. So please use the poll there, as you see on the screen, and select what best describes the work you're involved in. As you make your votes known to us, I'll mention that for more than 40 years, CCC has built relationships with publishers across the industry spectrum. And while we may be best known for our work with scholarly publishers, we provide licensing and content solutions for many other sectors, from trade, books, to news. So if you would make your selection there. And let's see whether we've got some results. So not surprisingly, we have a large portion of the audience from the scholarly and STM world, but significant numbers as well from business and professional, trade, book publishing. A few literary agents around our group today. Thank you for joining us, and as well in education. So thank you for letting us know about your background. And we now want to bring on my first guest for the program. Tatiana Khayrullina is Director and Lead Analyst for Scientific and Technical Solutions at Outsell, Inc., which covers the data and information industry. Tatiana joins us from Toronto. Welcome, Tatiana.
Thank you, Chris.
We're glad to have you here. And you know, the point that is, I guess, obvious to everybody in this particular health crisis, the coronavirus has meant a premium in the medical community on PPEs and N95 masks, but there's also a premium for professionals and the public for high quality information that's been curated by trusted parties. And you've done some research on the response to this emergency need for information that publishers have made. And I wonder if you can share some of that research with us.
Oh, certainly, with pleasure. Well, as the past 3 months have demonstrated, really the fight against pandemic uses information as an essential resource. Drug discovery, infection tracking, matching diagnosis to new symptoms, matching existing medications to unknown symptoms is all case studies in data mining, in data analysis. And that's the type of activities that healthcare practitioners and researchers in drug discovery engage in on a daily basis. So it's not surprising that I think it's safe to say right now that every single participant in the information data and analytics industry has come out with a solution, a resource that they want to offer to help fight the pandemic. And I wanted us to focus in particular on point of care solutions today, and I'll explain why. Well, first of all, this is the type of resources, information resources that are under added scrutiny by the rest of the world. Publishers are making them available while the world is watching. So publishers really want them to work. They're doing everything they're capable of, everything that is their disposal to make sure this information works for the practitioners, to make sure this information works for the researchers who are engaged in drug discovery, to make sure it's there when they need it and it's as up-to-date as possible. Which is why the way this information is delivered could point us towards how the industry will develop in the future, could point us towards kind of the travel of direction the industry is taking. And this is not to say that it's going to stick around. Every single best practice that's in place now will stay forever. Maybe not immediately, but some of them will. And it will be interesting to see what's working now, kind of to take away some early lessons learned. So on this slide, I have a few examples of resources made available by publishers to pretty much everybody, because the number one thing that happens to all of these resources, they become open, in other words, free. If there was a paywall, the paywall is dropped, and anybody who has an interest can access a resource. And among this multitude of examples that we can find in the publishing industry and information and data and analytics industry, I've just picked two that have to do with drug discovery and point of care. And that's two databases provided by Clarivate Analytics, the cartels intelligence, generics intelligence, and the drug discovery intelligence. So both serve the purpose of, first of all, keeping hospitals stocked with existing medications, and of course aid in drug discovery. So these are two free resources that used to be a paywall. The second interesting thing that happens to such resources is quite often a database becomes available, but it's not deemed enough. It has to be connected to an AI-powered engine for deeper, richer, better, more profound insights. And that's what happened to the COVID-19 antiviral candidate compounds dataset, which is in itself an impressive database of 50,000 chemical substances with known or potential antiviral activity. Again, before it was behind the paywall, now it's open for free access, but in addition to that, it's also contributed to the Allen Institute open research dataset for further data mining. The third interesting modality that happens to these open resources is if it's a resource based on updated, curated content, the frequency of updates are now happening pretty much up to the minute. Before, there could have been a lag of, I don't know, days, weeks, even months, allowing for the editorial rigor that has to be applied to keep this resource effective. For the researchers, well, now the waiting time is usually as short as it can possibly be. And how publishers are achieving this is a different story, but it's happening now. And we have an example of the Sentry 7 tools, the tool set provided by Walter Skluer, that's accomplishing exactly that. So it's a set of tools that is meant to provide real-time alerting and automated notifiable conditions for reporting infection cases to public health authorities. So essentially, it's the kind of activities that we depend on to understand how fast the infection is spreading. That's the curves we're watching on a daily basis. That's the kind of information that's feeding those curves, and this set of tools is now being updated in real time on a daily basis. And the fourth type of kind of changes that are happening to the way the information is provided is that we see data sets and types of content joined. And sometimes parties that collaborate are the parties that used to compete, in the understanding that it's a joint data set and it's a joint different disparate content sources that would provide better and richer insights for the practitioners that deliver the information that they're actually looking for in the most efficient way. The example that I have here is the Dynamet and Micromedics with Watson, provided by EBSCO and IBM. And this tool was in development before the pandemic, but the pandemic, of course, spurred its introduction into the marketplace. It has become free for new subscribers. And in general, I would say it's being battle tested right now. Of course, the interesting aspect is that it used to be two competing tools And they still do exist as two separate competing tools, but now they also exist as a joint pool of content. So having said that,
Tatiana, I want to ask you, because you mentioned that we're at a particularly striking moment, a moment of crisis. A lot is going on. The question will be, what will be around after the crisis, post-crisis? We're looking ahead to when we get out of this situation. And so I think I heard you say that we're going to expect to see a good deal more automation. We're going to have a greater reliance on speed. We're really going to need to get accustomed to working as quickly as we are now working today. But finally, the emphasis is on data. And you mentioned the sources of data. You're seeing publishers working with other publishers, so they're going beyond their own proprietary data and bringing in other sources of data so that they have a greater pool to work with. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, thank you for summarizing this. Like I said, when I was thinking about this topic, I thought, well, we should probably concentrate on this 4 kind of modalities of what's happening to the information being free and open to take the direction of travel from that. And that would be very early lessons learned. And like I said, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but I do believe that it kind of provides an impetus to the industry to follow in the months to come. And you're right, we do expect to see a great deal more of automation. Has to do with productivity, and it will probably most important for the type of content that depends on frequent updates. And the challenge there is that you would have to combine editorial rigor with the increased frequency of those updates. So that brings in the question of productivity tools, of automation of the processes. The second set of insights that could be derived from what's going on in the information industry right now is that, yes, there's a lot of emphasis on artificial intelligence, being put to good use. However, it has also become clear that where in the past we would think that, okay, take a data set and attach it to an algorithm and it should be good enough, what publishers are essentially teaching the market right now is that using just one data set, just one source of data, just one source of content will probably not provide the insights that the researchers are looking for, that the market is looking for. And the market is learning this and learning this quickly. So in the future, it will be really hard to compete, even with a nice and fast and modern artificial intelligence tool, which is only using one set of data, one set of content. So we'll see a lot more collaboration between information providers. We will also notice commoditization of data, where just delivering data and content will not be deemed enough by the market. I would like to also mention another set of insights that is also coming from this current experience. So we have noticed that we've seen many publishers report an increased traffic through their websites because their content is now free and available. And I would suggest that publishers can learn a lot from the essentially mountain of data they're now sitting on that they didn't have access to before. And that data can can provide interesting insights if you ask it the right questions. And the type of questions that can be asked is, well, how big is my entire market, my addressable market? Now that my product is free, who's coming to look at it? Who's coming to use it? Other segments in this audience that I never suspected would be interested. Should I rethink my market segmentation? Am I in the right geography? Do I see a lot of traffic coming from different regions? So on and so forth. So it's the user data that publishers are getting in exchange for making their products free that is really, really useful to mine for insights and to fine-tune the strategy in the months to come.
Well, Tatiana, we asked our audience to submit questions in advance of the program, and we did have a question I think gets to an important aspect of this issue around data, which is asking about the long-term changes that we ought to be thinking about making so that we as publishers, will be less reactionary in the future and more digitally adept overall. And I think for you, that would start with taking a look at data governance policy, and making sure that the data quality is at the highest level it can be. Tell us about that. I mean, why is, again, data the place to start?
Well, when we talk about digital transformation, anything digital is powered by data. And very often when we start talking about how can I use data in general, or what data do I need, we'll think of outside of what's already available inside a company. We'll think about the data we need to acquire. Maybe think about the partnership. I just mentioned partnerships, still valid. But however, before that partnership can happen, before I can attach your data set to somebody else's data set, the data set has to be in a certain condition, certain shape and form. Certain metadata has to be in place. And that's often overlooked. And really, to derive insights from any data related, from any data set or content, or to data mine, the data has to be prepared. So it's important to have to take a hard look at the state of data within the company, and to see how competitive it is. Because if the data governance is not at the right level, it's really hard to compete with companies that A, do have it at the right level, and B, are already partnering with somebody else. So if there is a kind of a slowdown right now and time to pause and think, this is what I would think about first. I would get my internal data ready and then start collecting the additional data available in the marketplace, start thinking about partnering and deriving the additional insights.
Well, Tatiana Khayrullina, Director and Lead Analyst for Outsell, thank you very much. And now I want to turn to our second guest today, Colin Lovrinovic, who joins us from Hamburg. He's a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Gould, Finch, a digital consultancy. Colin Lovrinovic has worked with clients from the international publishing industry on projects including strategy, innovation, and implementation of new technology, especially in AI. Colin has also worked for such companies as Amazon, Apple, Universal, and Bestseller, one of Germany's largest trade publishers. He joins us, as I mentioned, from Hamburg, Germany. Welcome to the program, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we are very happy you can be here because you're an evangelist for AI and publishing together. And right now you're at work on a number of projects for publishers who, as you told me earlier, want to come out on top after this crisis. And I wonder if you can sort of set the stage for us and explain this important point regarding artificial intelligence, AI.
Sure, my pleasure. So I'm just going to start with a few general remarks. There's a lot of misconceptions and different ideas out there what AI actually is. So I'll try to set it straight a little bit and bring some concrete examples rather than just work with buzzwords. But just to get started, I'm not going to read out all these examples that you can read here. But AI in general has a massive potential, of course, not just for publishing. It can perform certain tasks faster, cheaper, better, more reliant, more relentless than human beings can, provided that you use it in the right cases. So you can't apply it to every problem, and you have to make sure that you get the data right. As Tatiana said, you have to make sure that the setting is correct. And we actually prepared a global study, a big report together with Frankfurt Book Fair. And we can look into some of the details now, what publishers around the world actually said, how they use AI and where it's being used. What you can see here is the results from the survey. We talked to more than 300 publishers around the world on how they are using it or where they think they can implement it. And as you can see, the areas where the largest benefit is seen for the use of AI is marketing, distribution, but also the editorial department. When it comes to the editorial department, then we're more looking at different supportive functions rather than actually writing content. We also see some potential in other departments like administration, production, and press. Well, before we stay on this high level and talk about theory, let's look at a couple of examples. And let's dive into the first example that we have right here. Some of you are familiar with this example, I assume. It's by the Washington Post. They're one example for super local news creation. This is something that's been done a lot when it comes to data-based events. So the example we see here on the left-hand side is a scoring summary from a local high school football match that on a national-wide scale, nobody would really write large text or large review about this. But since you already have the data, because there's people at the match making notes who's scoring a touchdown, etc., you can easily turn this into text. On the right-hand side, you see what this data and a bit more actually got turned into. And this is happening with thousands of articles per year. They're obviously not the only newspaper publisher using this technology. It's been done all over the world. Some of the bigger publishers are doing this to report on local sports events, on elections, etc. So anything that's very data-based can be automatically quite easily be turned into text. That makes a lot of sense. So we are not anywhere close to having AI write great fiction, but when it comes to facts, it's actually a decent basis. And another example that we have, this is more for trade publishers. One example that the European ebook and audiobook distributor Bookwire is doing, they're working a lot with dynamic ads within ebooks. So you all know when you buy a book, in the end there's an ad for 1, 2, 3 similar titles that you might enjoy reading and buying. In the case of the digital world, in EPUBs, in this case, the sale is just 1 or 2 taps away. So what they're doing is they're using the algorithm to determine which book you're most likely to buy after you've read a certain title. This is being optimized automatically. So the data is actually being tracked, like how many people buy the book and then click on the link. And if the conversion rate isn't that great, they automatically change the title to something that is more likely to be bought. And obviously this is by the same publisher, so that the publisher who released this book actually benefits from this. And this is super dynamic. It can be changed on a daily basis. It can vary from different retailer to retailer. And this has led to up to 20% more backlist sales for publishers who participate in this. So really, it's reaching your audience where they are right now and just providing the right content suggestion, the right recommendations to them. So that's an example of how you can use it in marketing and sales. And now I have another example here that's well, from my own work. Like Chris said, initially we worked with a number of publishers and different tools. So this is something that we developed with and for various publishers. And don't worry, you don't have to understand this data. It's just a screenshot from behind the scenes, more or less. What we're doing is we're analyzing various backlist titles. We're analyzing potential new authors that could be signed. We're also analyzing competitor catalogs for different publishers. A lot of this is happening in the trade book sector, but it could also be applied to different areas. What we're doing is we're using data to predict popularity and the success rate of certain titles, and how likely it is how certain authors and books will perform. So we're not looking at the content, but we're looking at all the data around that. And again, I want to build up on what Tatiana said initially. Multiple data sets are necessary and super important for that. You have to get as many different sources as you can. So we're looking at sales ranking. We're also looking at performance on different social channels. We're looking at Google search results and a number of other different data sources to find out how hot or popular certain authors could be. This is being used for backlist marketing with some cases where an author did okay a couple of years ago, and now the publisher finds out that there's actually quite a big interest in this author. So it can be used to re-release the book or approach the author to publish a new book with them. This is also being used for signing decisions, which new authors should you take on if you only have limited slots in your program, or even to figure out how large should the size of your first print run be. What do you expect? How many items do you expect to sell right in the beginning? And because we've always liked building things ourselves, we also actually turned this into a product for ourselves rather than just selling it as a service to publishers. We've teamed up with a couple of people to look at titles that we think actually work well as audio books. So we're using this technology to figure out which books will most likely sell the most as audiobooks, and actually started entering production ourselves with several partners from the publishing industry. So that's a great way to figure out which content you should create and publish next. Maybe just to sum up some of these things and put this into context, what's going to happen now? What's the future like? Like I said initially, AI is not going to solve all of our problems, and the examples I just showed, they can't help you with every single use case. I just want to highlight that there is different opportunities. There's different ways where you can use AI, be it open source solutions, be it different providers or creating something yourself with a partner. There's a lot of potential out there. It can help you save money, make money, or at least make better decisions that can lead to a better business. And like I said, the machine's not going to be writing our books anytime soon. Definitely not the fiction books, but they can be used to actually sell more books. And well, by providing the right content in the right format at the right time to the right people and also at the right price. And I think now more than ever, it's a time to be creative, to try out new ways, because now resources are scarce. We have to make sure we do the right thing. We publish the right books, talk to the audience in the right way to really get to them, to be even more efficient than we ever were, and or go down new routes. For example, using technology, but also using new channels, seeing a lot of potential, working with audio subscription services, for example, really to not just secure the business, but also grow it. And I think there are some opportunities out there in this crisis, but also definitely beyond the crisis.
Right. Well, Colin Lovrinovic, publishing, whatever kind of publishing we're speaking of, is an industry that has been famously driven by gut, by instinct, by people, based on people's experience. And what I think I hear you saying is that AI isn't the sort of magic bullet, but it is a way to maybe fine tune that gut, to give you an edge. Is that right?
Yeah, completely agree. So it's really important to bring together different aspects. And publishing has always been about quality content, about discovering that, and also being one step ahead and well, defining a content market. So data can't always be used to do that. What we're doing is we're trying to bring what we're doing, but what we also see in other parts of the market. If you bring together great technology and a data mindset with people who understand content, I think that's really the ideal combination. So using the gut and then let's say the mechanical gut, and having the best of both worlds, that's super important. I don't think either way can only work on its own.
And at this moment, it really is important to be watching as closely as we can the data we're getting. You mentioned audiobooks. Obviously, we're all working from home and reading from home and doing everything at home right now. So we can't go to a bookstore. A lot of people are probably downloading not only ebooks, but audiobooks. And that's been a sector that's been growing so quickly that publishers have hesitated because they're not sure which titles to go with first. They have the data right now in front of them to start producing books today.
Yeah, totally. I think now there's a great chance, and we all know it's an important market, and now it's even stronger and more secure than it was. So we should take small risks to, make sure we're in a better position.
Right. And Colin, we have a question from the audience regarding the relationship with print, because even though we are still in our digital bubble at the moment, that will burst at some point and we will go back to bookstores and other kinds of channels that bring us the print product. And so the question here is regarding strategies for holding on to the print-based revenue in a world that, for the moment at least, has shifted to ebooks. Do you have some suggestions on that and how AI can help?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues examples how AI can help. I actually know one very large example, a large publisher from the Netherlands. They use AI to really predict the size of their print run. So they want to make sure that they don't print too many books or not too less, so they don't have too much in stock or too little. It's also being used by different bookstore chains when it comes to demand prediction. So being sure that you have the right amount at hand, that if people get to your bookstore, if you can open, that you have the right titles there. You don't have titles on stock that nobody wants, but are short on those that actually could be sold. So anything that's related to demand and logistics, really, there's a big potential there. And I think the examples we've talked about in marketing, they can also be applied to print books when it comes to digital marketing for physical products.
All right. Well, Colin Lovrinovic in Hamburg with the digital consultancy Gould, Finch, thank you so much for your presentation on AI and publishing. We'll remind our audience that there is an opportunity for you to address questions to our panel. Please use the webinar chat screen. Let us know what's on your mind if you have a question, particularly for one or other of the panelists let us know who it is for. But I want to turn right now, go to London and invite onto the program Ritu Dhand. Ritu Dhand is Vice President, Editorial for Nature Journals at Springer Nature. Before joining Nature in 1999, she spent over 10 years in cancer research, completing her PhD at University College London. Ritu Dhand, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very happy you can join us because you bring us the perspective of a publisher and a researcher at this very critical moment in the coronavirus crisis. And I guess the way to start is, as a researcher and a publisher, have you ever seen a time when academic research has received more public and professional attention?
No, I haven't. It's, you know, I want to say it's crazy. I want to say it's mad, but it's also so good. The way that the scientific community have come together, are working together, are collaborating at a level that we could never, ever have dreamt of. It's the, you know, we always think science should be very collegiate, very supportive. But in the real world, with grants, with competition, with, you know, the need to do better amongst individuals and in scientific sort of laboratories, that competition does, the collaboration doesn't manifest in the way that it has with COVID-19 research. I was looking at the number of papers that are in bioRxiv and medRxiv, which are preprint servers for biomedical papers. And there's just shy of 3,000 papers submitted on this type of research. So there's around 2,750. And I was looking at the submissions that Nature journals have received starting in February. And we have received over 2,000 submissions at our journals. So, you know, you can see the sort of the strength behind this exercise, the number of people that are writing papers, submitting papers. You know, everybody wants to try Nature and one of the other big journals in the first instance, and I'm sure there's a lot of to and fro. I mean, I have heard from a lot of other publishers, and we have seen ourselves that the standard isn't as high as we are used to, but, you know, these are papers that are being written up, created in a space of 2 months or so, a month, 2 months. That's literally unheard of. And I think, you know, while the rigor may not always be the highest, what is so important at this time is that we share everything, because we just don't know what will be important. You know, we're looking at patients, you know, 15, 20, maybe 100 in a hospital. What may seem as a small observation amongst a small group of patients, what we're realizing is that every hospital seeing that small observation, and suddenly that small observation is no longer irrelevant. It's quite significant, and we can see, you know, the impact it's making. So everything is important at that level. And you see on social media, it's absolutely incredible. People are pulling out preprints, discussing preprints. You're seeing scientists making the actual science more accessible, explaining to the masses what is so important about this paper that a group of scientists is discussing. You can see scientists sharing information at a data level before they've even got to the paper stage. And it's all open. It's not private groups anymore, because we just don't know who might have something of relevance. And so everyone is sharing everything. You know, Nature journals have signed up to encouraging every paper that we have submitted, certainly if it goes out for review, there is a preprint deposited. We have committed to sending the paper to the WHO at the same time. We are committing to data deposition as it happens. So for instance, if there is a genome, we're not waiting for the paper to be published. We are encouraging, strongly suggesting that scientists deposit now while the paper is still under review to ensure it's being widely shared. And everything that we are publishing on COVID-19 is being published CC BY open research.
Well, Ritu, Dhand, you know, this kind of openness, this dynamic environment that we are seeing is changing research. It's changing publishing. Tell us a bit about how it's changing nature. I mean, those doubling of submissions is a workflow challenge that you must be having. And there's also something that's critical that I believe Tatiana was telling us about earlier, which is your audience is changing. And why is that important?
Okay, there's a few questions in there, Chris. So I'll go back to how we're dealing with this number of manuscripts. And it's, you know, Nature has full-time professional editors. So that first screen happens within the journal. We can't call on the community to help us do that first screen because we don't have an external board or external scientists that support us at that level. So everyone is working, I don't know, something like 18 hours a day. All the editors that can help look at COVID papers are doing that. The good thing about COVID-19 is that because it's a systemic disease, we're getting papers in lots of different areas. So there's immunology, there's virology, there's modeling, there is, you know, vascular biology, there's heart research. So we can actually call on quite a large pool of editors to help us look at these papers. So that is good. I said before that the level of rigor isn't always the highest. That means that we do reject a lot, a very high percentage off the bat. So they don't go to reviewers. We don't want to waste reviewer time with papers that we just know aren't rigorous enough. And so we're doing that sort of early rejection ourselves. And the other things that we have done is every single paper is published fast track. So our normal turnaround time for accept a publication is about 5 to 6 weeks. These are being published in 1 to 2 weeks. And that just means that they go to the top of the pile for everyone, but not only going to the top of the pile, they are a high priority. So everyone in the chain has to deal with them immediately. There's no sitting around for 24 hours. The peer review procedure, you know, some journals are publishing these papers in 35 to 40 days. And that doesn't mean the peer review process is any less rigorous. But because everyone's so interested in this research, it's easier to find referees because everyone wants to see the paper. The referees are committing to reviewing these papers in hours, whereas we normally give 1 or 2 weeks. The editors are absolutely aware that it's very difficult to ask for revisions, certainly not extensive revisions. We can ask for things to be tidied up, but there's not a lot more that we know, can be done. So you're actually making a will it make it in one round or not type of decision. Whereas on the Nature journals, we usually, I think 95% of our papers go through a pretty extensive revision. But the bar for publication isn't as high. So at the moment, we're publishing 1 to 2% of what's submitted because there's no opportunity for revision. It comes in, if it's good enough to go out, we'll put it out, but if it isn't, we're not going to hold it back, which is a very, very different way of working. Is it fair? I think in the normal world, researchers wouldn't think that's fair because they want an opportunity to be able to make things better or write or reflect on referees' comments. But where we are with this crisis, the most important thing is that the most rigorous research comes out as quickly as possible. And so it's an in or out decision. How has it changed our audience? What we're finding is that we're receiving a lot more submissions from the clinical sector, the public health sector, which isn't a sector that we have traditionally received a lot of submissions in. I mean, we have a Nature journal, Nature Medicine, which does receive more submissions in this space, but Nature hasn't received as many in the past. But because this is a biomedical disease, because the data is coming out of hospitals and from clinical labs, we are engaging with this audience a lot more. And that's great. That isn't, something that I would want to see change. I hope we can build on that moving forward.
Well, Ritu Dhand, Vice President Editorial for Nature Journals at Springer Nature in London, thank you very much indeed for a glimpse at the changes underway at Nature in important research as well. Also, I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for any of our panel, please do use the chat. Let us know what's on your mind and who the question may be for. And finally on our program, before we get to a round robin of questions, joining from outside of Oxford, in London, actually close to London, is Carl Robinson, Senior Director of Publisher Solutions for Copyright Clearance Center. And Carl, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
Well, we appreciate your joining us for this virtual town hall, and you are virtually joining us, even though you're in Oxford. At home, you're joining us, as the image shows us. You could see our CCC offices in St. Catherine's Docks on a nice day in the center of London. And Carl, you've been hearing what everyone's been talking about. You meet with publishers all the time, and this is a moment for reflection. The coronavirus crisis is one that has caused us all to think about things we had sort of put off thinking about and re-examining our lives. You've been thinking about this notion of resiliency and what it means for publishers.
Yes, I have, and I think it's always an advantage to be the last in some ways, to hear what my colleagues have said before me. And I think what's been interesting, what's come out strongly, is this whole movement towards the changing nature of things and how data can support that. And one of the things that stood out, I think it was Colin who mentioned AI, and that graph where he mentioned, editorial and marketing and so on. They were high on that graph of benefits of AI, and that strikes me that's resonating with what I see out there, which is approaching the market differently, needing to understand our markets differently, so that we know how to pivot in a crisis, so that we know what's going to need to change, and we can use that insight, if you like, to help direct where we need to go. But I do think that while data is part of the answer, and I think everybody was saying this in their own way, but nobody actually landed on the same word that I would, which is, there's a partner to that, which is agility, which is, and I'll define what I mean by agility in a moment. But I think what I'm thinking of there is data and agility hand in hand help you become much more resilient and much more able to pivot in a crisis such as the one we've got now. And we are seeing examples of publishers who can pivot. My own background is more in educational publishing, so I've been watching quite a lot of what's been going on there recently, and that's quite interesting. I'll touch on that in a moment too. But another thing I wanted to pick up on from what Tatiana said, and I thought it was a great phrase, I'm just going to make sure I quote it correctly. Tatiana, you said anything digital is powered by data, and you use that in the context of digital transformation. And this is one of these things that I've started to say, with colleagues at work and also with publishers, is I've never come across a publisher who's suddenly transformed. It's never about sudden transformation. It's more about one day realizing that we're not the same company we used to be. One day realizing I'm transformed. And so that leads me to this whole idea of there being evolution in the process, a journey towards transformation. And so when you think about that with data and agility, I kind of choose to think that, with the sort of idea of evolution, you're favoring what you're good at and you're favoring the successful strategies. That's what evolution is all about. And I think that's what leads to transformation. So data. And again, I think it was Tatiana. I was echoing what you're saying is, big data, huge amounts of data on the screen right now. We're showing the kinds of data that are available to publishers. Descriptive data about the book, administrative data is kind of, where are we holding it, all of that kind of stuff. Reference data, statistical data, structural data. What is this journal made up of? What is this book made up of? How many parts? Where was that piece used before? And my kind of favorite new one, which I came across I think actually in an Outsell briefing I was with a meeting once, somebody used the term exhaust data. And I loved that idea of exhaust data. This is data that you get by accident. So data that teaches you something, but that you didn't intend to gather that data. You just got it because, for example, somebody didn't find something they were searching for on your site. And that tells you what they were looking for, and you can infer insights from that. So all these kinds of data are available to us. But that is all about, the danger of that is just having far too much data. And so then I think Colin said something about kind of, AIs and other things can help us tune that data. And I choose the term curate it. So curating this noise to get to data that is meaningful and allows you to get to some kind of insight. So I think better data in publishing is curated data that is well utilized. And that kind of brings me on to kind of the agility factor, really, which is, better data makes for better choices for data-driven value, and the better the data, the better the insight. But how do you actually kind of, lean into that data?
Right, and you were mentioning about the way that data drives publishing. It is around discoverability, it's marketing, it's efficiency, commissioning.
Yes.
And at the moment, we're all doing this, virtually and at a level of speed we haven't seen before. And so the data really is something that we can't live without.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think everybody else has said the same thing. I mean, I feel like I'm repeating other things, but what for me was interesting was, and again, I think it may have been Colin who said it, and certainly I think, Ritu, you were talking about building on changes and looking at the data we're gathering right now. What does that tell us? How does that change the way we need to do things? Colin, you mentioned about commissioning. I think you may not have used the term commissioning, but you talked about informing the content we might want to publish. You talked about the audiobook exercise that you were doing. And it strikes me that one of the things we can do, and in that evolutionary idea of favoring where we're strong in order to have a successful outcome, a future, is looking at that data and learning from that in an ongoing way. So that comes down to that kind of agility aspect, is how do we pivot based upon data? How do we change our worldview based upon the data that's coming in? And how do we create a mindset that says, I'm willing to move, I'm willing to change? Because a lot about this pivoting in a crisis isn't just technology, which it is. Have we got the right technology in place? It isn't just kind of necessarily all the data sets, because we probably do have access to data, but it's also willingness to learn from that data as an organization and change the way we do things to take forward into the future those things which are serving us well now.
Right, and what that comes down to, Carl, is a term you use called reach, and it means different things to different publishers. At this particular moment, one publisher may be more focused on reaching a new audience, the way Ritu Dhand was telling us. Others, of course, are probably most worried about their bottom line and thinking about sales. Talk about how data drives those kinds of different reaches.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of said it really. Is, you know, reach is a nice good term because it's not saying what the data is giving you personally as a publisher. Like I've said, for some institutions, reach will be about impact. It'll be about having the impact that you need to have to make a difference in the world. For other institutions, other organizations, it'll be about dollars. And I think, you know, in the current crisis, this is about, I love that. What did you say? Sharing is important. We just don't know what will be important, Ritu said. So it strikes me again, right now, reach is all about getting that information out there and enabling people to make the best use of it to help everybody out of this crisis. So data in all its forms is driving that ability to reach where you need to reach, whatever that means for you. The quote there from Peter McCarthy, I think, you know, I used this in a Frankfurt talk last year, and it is exactly that, you know, for a lot of publishers, that, you know, what they really like is sales. And so, you know, I was trying to be, you know, even-handed. You know, we can be lofty in our ambitions, but there is also, in this current crisis, a concern about the future. But again, I take that learn from what is working for us now and take it forward into the future. That's the evolution. That's what will lead to an eventual moment of, oh, I'm transformed.
Well, thank you, Carl Robinson from Copyright Clearance Center and Senior Director of Publisher Solutions at our office in London. And we were talking about data. The data we're going to have on our program today are the questions that our audience has submitted to us. We had some questions in advance, and you can also use the chat on your screen right now to let us know what's on your mind. If any of the presentations today have prompted a question or a thought, we hope you will share that with us. And you know, we did have some questions in advance here, and I want to get to a couple of those while those in the audience offer their questions on the chat box. And maybe, Carl, we can continue the discussion there, because I think are talking about the ways that digital transformation provides a return on investment. And the question was asked about, you know, if you could solve the biggest challenge out there by going digital, what would that challenge be?
It's a really good question. I did think about this a little bit, because there's so much to unpack in there. Is what do we mean by return on investment? What kind of investment, and so on. But I think some of the things I've seen, the challenges that have been solved by going digital, and to use that term broadly, then I think it has been the ability to deliver more quickly, more competitively. I've certainly seen publishers who, by transforming or evolving towards a transformed state, if you like, that they have become more efficient at their processes, more efficient in their delivery. Like now, I was talking with a publisher just the other day who had the foresight, you know, I mean, obviously they didn't see this coming, but they had the foresight to start investing in new ways of delivering educational technology, educational learning, and we're developing a platform that is now suddenly becoming very pertinent. Interestingly, overnight, we've heard about the Cengage McGraw-Hill well, not the demerger, but the cancellation of the merger. And both CEOs of McGraw-Hill and Cengage cited digital learning as the thing they're going to continue to focus on. So even in the midst of, hey, we're decoupling this merger, they're talking about that as the next big thing. So I think, you know, I've seen that happen before. I think those are challenges, the ability to pivot, to do things more efficiently, to be cost effective, to get more done per head. And I think those being digital helps solve that. Again, it's all about people, process, and technology. It's not just about, you know, digital, whatever that means, solving the problem. It's not just the AI, as Colin said, solving everything. You still need to bring humans into this, and you still need to change the way you do things. But that, I think, are the challenges that can be solved.
Yeah, and indeed, Colin Lovrinovic, we have a question here that gets to the heart of your own presentation, which is how, you know, certainly the big players are using AI to drive their decision-making in this crisis. What if you're not so big? How do you have the ability to create an AI-driven solution that could help you in your own work? Can you describe how AI can matter even to smaller players?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple of different answers to that. So on the one hand, If you're a small player, you can always look for bigger partners. Like the Bookwire example I had, they are a distributor, so they work with tens of thousands of publishers probably around the world. So all of them just use their AI tool without paying extra for that. So there are partners like that you can team up with without having to develop something for your own. And when it comes to smaller companies, I saw one question here that refers to small boutique literary agencies, how they can bring their backlist into audio, right? So the example that I showed before, where we use AI to go through large amount of data to decide what's the best audiobook, right? We learned, initially we started with manual processes. We looked at different metrics behind it, success stories, and analyzed that. And then we created a tool that helps us apply that to, in one case, 4,000 titles within half an hour. So we know of those 4,000 titles, which 10 are the most likely to be successful. If you have a smaller catalog, let's say you have 20 books or 50 books you're looking after, or authors, you can start with a manual process. You don't have to throw AI at that. You can look at different data that you think is relevant, like which genre does well as an audiobook, or how many sales do I have? How many sales do similar titles have as audiobooks, right? You can look at success stories and make your own decisions, and you can start manually if it's very small amounts of data you have, and then gradually see if you can get to an automated solutions. And I think if you have, you need a tech-savvy person somewhere. Either that person is in your team, then you can automate certain processes yourself. Otherwise, that person can help you to find the right external partners and either build something yourself by using different tools that might be free of charge or cheap, and build them together, or you have to look for experts to help you. But I think there's a wide range between paying a lot of money for a huge solution and just doing something by yourself, manually. And somewhere in the middle, I think everybody can find their own solution.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Colin Lovrinovic. And Ritu, Dhand, I want to ask you a question that's a practical question, but maybe also, if I could call it, a philosophical question. Someone's asking us about, is this crisis signaling the end of the office? And, you know, Springer Nature has offices in London and Germany and the United States, around the world. And you've made that pivot, that moment we all kind of flipped from the physical space to the virtual digital space. Any reflections on what that has meant to Nature, to your work, to your teams?
I think it depends on, you know, the job of the team. So the actual editors, they can almost work in their entirety from home. Production editors, they have struggled because they need more equipment. They need to be on our server more often. They have found it harder. I think everyone has been quite surprised by how it can be done. I mean, when the first weekly edition of Nature came out and it had been entirely produced from people working at home, it was a moment. We had a little clap because we didn't know if it was going to happen, but it did happen. Will it change the way we work? The editors are already work 1 or 2 days a week from home, but you know, there may be more flexibility around that because it has worked so well. I think the biggest surprise is that when everybody works from home, everyone's on the same level playing field. There's no special group that sat in London or in New York or in Shanghai who are dominating the discussion. When everybody is online, there's a certain courtesy, a certain way, a behavior, which means that everyone can engage at the same level. And the problem with the old world was there would be hubs who dominated the discussion, which meant the satellite people struggled to get in. So that is definitely food for thought for how we converse with satellite offices and people who are working remotely.
Right, and Tatiana, Khayrullina, I want to let you have the last word, so to speak, on all of this. You follow at Outsell the way that technology impacts publishing. My question would be, how surprised are you at the resiliency that we've already shown in publishing, the immediate response, the kinds of things that all of the panel have described here have happened in a remarkably compressed period of time. And I would imagine some people wouldn't have thought it was possible. Are you surprised by what you are seeing?
I'm impressed, but I have to say I'm not surprised. You know, crises tend to accelerate what was already in place. And what's happening right now is not surprising by any stretch. Like I mentioned before, whatever is making sense now has always made sense. It was just on a slow burner. So we've seen it accelerated, but I am really impressed by the effort that everybody's putting into making things happen and really contributing to this common effort. And if I may, I would like to comment on the previous question regarding the digital and what it means for publishing, what it actually changes. I think what it changes to the greatest extent is access. The same content is provided in a different channel. And originally, if you think back 20 years ago when internet was just picking up, we suddenly gained access to a lot more information instantly and more conveniently. And it continues to mean just that. And I think this current situation has proven it once again. Many things have gone digital and suddenly they are in our homes, including our workplaces. So digital is access, and then everything else, of course, that Carl mentioned.
Right. Well, actually, I think that's a great place to end because of digital, because of the technology that allows us to bring this program to our audience. We've had access to some wonderful insights and the latest information from our panel. I want to thank everybody who's been on the line for joining us. Ritu, Dhand in London with Springer Nature, Tatiana, Khayrullina in Toronto with Outsell, Colin Lovrinovic in Hamburg with Gould, Finch, and my colleague in London at Copyright Clearance Center's offices there, Carl Robinson. Thank you all very much for participating today. I also want to thank my Copyright Clearance Center colleagues who have made the presentation possible, kept the technology running, have watched all the dials for the last hour. That would be Allison Anderton, Haley Sund, Doreen Masiak, and Joanna Murphy-Scott. Thanks to them. Finally, if you want some more information about what we are up to at Copyright Clearance Center, to find out when our next town hall will be, to learn about our latest posts for our blog and so forth, you can subscribe on copyright.com to both Velocity of Content, our blog, as well as to our own podcast series, which I host, called Beyond the Book. Again, thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.